everyone, it's me, Emma, the heavy metal lawyer. So, I've decided to take a break from doing daily metal because it is a bit too much of a time suck for me. I really enjoy doing it, but I just don't have the time to do it as well as I would want. And I want this to be fun for me rather than work, because it's a way for me to blow off steam talking about music, which I really like to do. So, yeah, I'm going to shift to doing videos not so much on a deadline, not so much tied to specific dates that I have to do them. But I'm still going to focus a lot on history, on political economy, on all that good stuff. And I'd still be happy to have some more guests on, so please DM me if you're interested in discussing any subject or band or album or whatever. This video is going to be the first in a mini-series breaking down extreme metal subgenres. Borrowing from different subgenres and styles is pretty common in metal nowadays, but all of these subgenres are still useful ways to categorize music and to determine what kind of sound you're into. Or if you're like me and you're pretty much into all of them, you just use the subgenres to show off your knowledge about music. Today we will be delving into black metal subgenres. Black metal, a genre of blasphemy and blast beats, tremolo guitar picking, and lo-fi recordings. Black metal as we know it today is mostly descended from the Norwegian black metal originals in the 1990s, bands like Darkthrone, Burzum, and Mayhem, who in turn developed their sound from bands like Venom, Bathory, and Hellhammer in Europe, and bands like Volcano and Sarcophago in Brazil in the 1980s. Today, bands all around the world have taken the basic elements of black metal and remixed them, often by crossing them with other genres. I'm going to cover 9 of these black metal subgenres, which is by no means a comprehensive list of all of the black metal subgenres, but it will certainly give you somewhere to start. First off, we've got ambient black metal. Ambient black metal was first made by the infamous Burzum, but fortunately for all of us who don't want to support white supremacist dweebs, it has been adopted by a whole range of musicians around the world. Ambient black metal takes advantage of the blast beats and tremolo picking in black metal, creating more layers of sound rather than the guitar riffs that you expect in practically any other genre of metal. Creating soundscapes rather than melodies is prevalent in another genre, ambient music. So while music for airports sounds nothing like Diadem of 12 Stars, they're both using similar techniques to create ambience, albeit one is an ambience of calm and pleasant, where the other is more demonic and haunting. I'm going to be talking about a lot of my favorite ambient black metal bands for my videos at the end of this year on the best metal albums of the year, so I'll forego naming any of those bands and instead recommend for your introduction to ambient black metal Teeth, Glory, and Injury by Altar of Plagues out of Ireland. Check it out. Next up is folk black metal, another black metal subgenre, another begrudging credit to Burzum, which incorporated Norwegian folk music in their third album with the howling depravity of their first 2 albums. A more clear and less racist example of this would be the band Kampfar, especially their first 3 albums. But I think the most interesting folk black metal of the last decade has come mostly out of East Asia rather than Europe, though also shout-outs need to be made to the Brazilian scene for their use of indigenous instruments as well. From Mongolian throat singing to incorporating traditional stringed instruments like the koto or woodwinds like the shakuhachi, traditions spanning literally thousands of uninterrupted years seem destined to seep into the area's metal music. If you want to hear what I'm talking about, a good place to start is the album Takasago Army by Chtonic. Next up is industrial black metal. Industrial music is essentially electronic dance metal, and even the more out there iterations of industrial, like Throbbing Gristle, are far from the frigid howling of black metal. It would seem like these two genres just could not mix without one swallowing up the other. And yet, there are bands that are able to blend these two different sounds into one cohesive bit of madness, and none as widely hailed as Havoc Unit, the moniker taken on by the band and Oceans when they fully embraced industrial black metal. Their album, H.IV+, shows where there is overlap between industrial and black metal, an obsession with the evil of humanity, and a belief that this evil is interminable. The band frequently references the Holocaust and Nazis, but more as an example of the evils of humanity rather than the band being one of the less savory Nazi-worshipping parts of the black metal scene, at least as far as I've been able to discern from their lyrics and a little bit of internet research. This music isn't quite clubbing music, I'd say, but if you're into the heavier side of electronic music like breakcore and heavier electro stuff like the Bloody Beetroots, you'll probably get a kick out of this. Next up we have Black Gaze. Metalhead friend of mine told me the loudest concert he's ever been to was not a metal concert, but instead was a concert for My Bloody Valentine, the band which founded the genre called shoegaze, which is basically garage rock put through so many effects and filters that it becomes like a distant echo of garage rock, though unlike a faint distant echo, shoegaze is actually much louder than the garage rock that it is transforming. There's key overlap here with black metal in regards to using rather than avoiding feedback, having vocals sound distant or removed, and creating walls of sound with drums and guitars, albeit in different ways. It was practically destined for the two to come together, especially after ambient black metal first showed the potential for black metal mixing with other genres. While Deafhaven has gotten the most attention of any band in black gaze, I think this subgenre is best introduced by the first album to fully realize its potential, Eke de Lune by Alceste out of France. Next up is psychedelic black metal. Black metal often touches lyrically on mental health, most often depression, but also more generally on ideas of insanity and madness, of being unable to know what is real and what is a delusion, of being unable to control depraved urges or unhinged actions. The genre I most associate with these themes, however, isn't black metal, but rather psychedelic music. The idea of psychedelic music has been commercially deformed into a hedonistic, carefree embrace of mind-altering substances. But that's hardly the reality of psychedelic music. The quest of psychedelic musicians to go beyond their mind's perception often broke them mentally, from Syd Barrett of Pink Floyd to Roky Erickson of 13th Floor Elevators. A psychotic break from paranoid schizophrenia sounds more like the subject of a black metal song than a hippy dippy song to do drugs to. So maybe the blend of psychedelic rock and black metal is the best way to musically express it. The boundary pushing of psychedelic music combined with the chaos and depravity of black metal. If you want to see this theory in action, look no further than the bizarre and disturbing Mesterin Kinsey by Oranzi Pazuzu. Next up, we have raw black metal. Raw black metal is pretty much what most people think of as black metal. Norwegian 90s style orthodoxy. It's all about corpse paint, shitty recording quality, and, unfortunately, fucked up racist politics. It was unfortunately pretty hard to find a band that is both considered broadly to be raw black metal by hardcore adherents and also wasn't some Nazi worshipping asshole. And speaking of, here's some bands you're better off staying away from in that regard. Abigor, Acherontis, Destroyer 666, Dissection, who literally committed a hate crime murder, Inquisition, Cavum, Lurker of Chalice, Marduk, Mayhem, Mugla, Minen Warfare, Pest Noir, Primordial, Take, and Zather. Zasther, whatever, I don't care how to pronounce it. When you tell people not to listen to these bands online, you usually get a barrage of responses about how you should judge music by whether it is good. And hey, before I found out about their politics, I did enjoy the music of both Destroyer 666 and Pest Noir. I have no qualms in admitting that shitty people can make music that sounds good, or in the case of black metal, sounds terrible but in a good way. But really, life is too short and art is too precious to waste energy, money, and time on Nazis. None of the bands I listed above hold a candle, for example, to Zeal and Ardor, who are so original they pretty much have their own black metal subgenre. And all of the above listed bands at minimum want to terrorize that band, if not outright kill them. I listen to plenty of problematic bands with problematic members and problematic lyrics and so on. Separating that from the music is possible to a certain degree, particularly when the music is very old, like Wagner. But this isn't Wagner. You really gotta draw the line with Nazis. Alright, enough of that. Back to the music. If you want a great introduction to raw black metal without having to listen to fascist bullshit, I highly recommend Magnetism of War by Bone All. It is raw, it is wretched, it's a really good time. Next up is symphonic black metal. Symphonic black metal is exactly what it sounds like, the merger of classical and romantic symphony music with black metal. This is done either with synthesizers or with actual orchestras. Peppering black metal with some classical instrumentation is not uncommon. A violin here, some choral singing in the background, maybe some cello. But symphonic black metal stands apart just like a symphony stands apart from a string quartet. Whether by synthesizer or actual orchestra, the sound of symphonic black metal is a full orchestral sound rather than coloring with a couple of classical instruments in an interlude. And of course, the kings of symphonic black metal are Dimmu Borgir. And being partial to the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra, I have to recommend their album, Death Cult Armageddon. Next up is Black and Roll. This is in some ways the original black metal music. When you listen to those original bands like Hellhammer and Venom, the bands that most capture that original sound are the bands in this black and roll subgenre. Because ultimately Hellhammer and Venom were playing their own takes on the first wave of metal music, which in turn was just psychedelic blues rock taken up one more level. So there is really only one level of separation between bands like Venom and Hellhammer and straight up rock and roll music. And of course, another major influence here is the band Motorhead and that fast but still bluesy metal known as speed metal. We could even take things back further. After all, ever since Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads, rock and roll has always flirted with the satanic. Black and roll just makes that a bit more explicit. And few modern albums exemplify this sound, like Satanic Royalty by Midnight. And finally, we're going to wrap things up with the subgenre Neocrust. Some people are probably going to say that this one isn't a subgenre of black metal, to which I emphatically say, maybe you're right. But I need to try to divide the subgenres evenly between each video, so give me a break. Anyways, Neocrust is the term for a recent trend in crust punk music towards elaborate arrangements and focuses on ambience and soundscapes. Crust punk, which I'll break down in a later video, came out of the cross between anarcho-punk like Crass and early extreme metal like Venom. So unsurprisingly, the sound usually falls in the realm of lo-fi, thrashy songs set to D beats about how capitalism is stupid and squatting is cool. But in the late 1990s, some bands playing in crust punk decided to expand their horizons and incorporate more variety into the music. And in particular, they borrowed extensively from black metal music, which was just starting to get popular at the time. Bands like His Hero Is Gone, the members of which went on to form the even more influential Neocrust band Tragedy. Some bands like Nux Vomica and Fall of Ephraphra push things even further by writing these crust punk epics, sprawling songs, some more than 10 minutes long, comprised of several sections with overlaid guitar parts, often featuring lots of that tremolo picking, which was lifted directly from black metal. I think I talk about the genius of Nux Vomica enough that hopefully people will get that recommendation from other videos. So for this one, I'm going to recommend The Downfall of Gaia and In the Hearts of Emperor split. Mostly, though, the Downfall of Gaia side of that split, which is 2 songs. The first is titled These Wet Feathers, and the second is titled Won't Dry Themselves. Just listen to it. It's crazy. The first time I ever listened to it, it blew my mind. And there you have it, a starter kit for black metal subgenres, 9 albums for you to listen to get the full universe of what black metal can be. And I've linked all of these albums in the video description if you want to check them out. And if you like this video, please subscribe so you won't miss the next video in this series where I'll be exploring the subgenres of death and metal.